Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unmuted Love. Today, I have the honor of talking to Katelyn. And Katelyn, I'm going to have you pronounce your last name because I might get it wrong and I don't want to.
Okay. Mabry.
Mabry. Yes, I was going to pronounce it incorrectly.
That's okay.
Katelyn is an ADHD coach and a mom of 4. And she and all 4 of your kids are neurodivergent?
Correct.
I don't know. My brain is kind of hurting thinking about that. Which is really awesome, though, that you learned, right? You learned from yourself and your kids, and you are sharing with other parents who really need some support.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time up here today to come talk to my listeners who are generally parents of children who have experienced early trauma and attachment breaches and who are often diagnosed with ADHD. And we always wonder, is it ADHD or is it trauma or is it autism, right? Because all 3 of those kind of overlap. But the truth is, you still have to parent them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you could discern one from the other, which you can sometimes, but sometimes you really can't, you still have to practice some parenting strategies, right? That are a little bit different than the average bear.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always say we have to go through the side door instead of the front door.
Yeah, totally. Right. If I had a panel of parents here, they would just be like chomping at the bit to ask you questions. Let me start by just having you talk about maybe what you see most and what you think is the most helpful for parents when they realize, wow, I am actually parenting a child who is very busy. And I'm really tired and I don't know what to do. And also the child may have things like rejection sensitive dysphoria, right? And a lot of our kids have that. So there's just a lot going on. And I'm sure you have to start at the beginning. So where's the beginning for you when you're working with a parent?
The thing is a lot of times as parents, we go into wanting to fix it, right? Like we think, okay, well, I need to use this tool or this strategy and I need to do this thing and that thing. And then we're finding frustration because everything's falling to the wayside, right? And it's because our kids have so many layers going on beneath the surface and so much internal processing going on and delayed, skills going on and rejection sensitivity going. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle that oftentimes as parents, we don't put into play because we're just looking at the behavior, right? And so a lot of times we're trying to just kind of stop the behavior, do a quick fix here and there. And there is zero shame in that, parents. I am right there with you. It's so hard not to be reactive, right? Like we're kind of reactive by nature and we're reacting based on our own past and our own generational cycles of reacting. So I think the biggest starting point is a self-check. Am I more of a reactor or am I mindfully responding to my child based on what's underneath the surface of the behavior I'm seeing? Right? So I think the first and foremost is the self-reflection, which is hard. It's hard as parents to be like, ooh, look in the mirror. Let's see what's going on. Am I a reflection of what I want to see for them? Right? If we are yelling and screaming and, a hot mess coming in reaction to their behavior, they're going to mirror that. Right? And they're going to feed off of that and they're going to fuel off that. And so in the opposite respect, am I taking the steps as a parent to try to get myself to a place of regulation so that I can help co-regulate with them or help mirror that regulation? And that's that first step into the next step to take. And that's whatever it is that you're seeing as a behavior.
So when a parent tells me, I can't regulate all the time. I can't be focused on regulating myself all the time. I'd be like regulating myself all the time.
Yep.
That's kind of it, isn't it? That's sort of the truth, right? You have to be regulating yourself all the time. Do you have some tricks, some tips, something to help parents know what it means to regulate all the time?
Well, and a lot of times I hear that. I don't have time to regulate, right? We live in such a busy hustle bustle society. We're all so busy. I mean, I get it. I have 4 kids. I feel like I don't know my right from my left sometimes. Go, 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 go. But, and to be honest, I have a hard time regulating too all the time, right? And I mean, we can talk about that too, how there also is power in pausing and admitting that, hey, that was a big reaction out of me, and I am sorry for yelling. Let's try again. Let's reset. Let's reconnect. So there is power in that too. But in terms of your question of, how to regulate, is giving yourself that margin as a parent, right? Like giving yourself that space to practice the pause, and the own self reframing, right? They're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time, right? Like I think really making sure you have the right perspective in place when we are parenting can be a huge game changer. Because a lot of times parents get into the habit of thinking, they're just giving me such a hard time, and this behavior and that, they never listen, and da-da. And again, you guys, I'm right there with you. This is zero judgment. This is all, empathy and compassion for the struggle of parenthood. But there's just so much power in practicing that pause and practicing our own thought reframe of, okay, she's having a hard time, right? She's dysregulated. And the best way for her to get regulated more quickly so I can get out the door on time is for me to retreat and regulate first before I further respond to her, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
so it's a mindset.
It's a mindset and a practice of pause and reset for yourself. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's probably one of the things I try to teach the most. Also, the thing that gets missed the most, I think, because it's so busy and because it's so hard, right? And people are tired at a certain point, right? I mean, I don't know how you do 4 children. I really don't. 4 just neurotypical children, but you have 4 neurodivergent ones. I mean, maybe that's actually easier. I don't know. Because you're like, it's easier to kind of go, oh yeah, we're all like this.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it is. I mean, it is a beautiful connection point for us, right? Like we get each other on a very deep level. So it is chaotic, right? Like there's lots of emotions, lots of things in play, lots of dysregulation with time and with organization. And, there's a lot of things that are being worked on, but at the same time, we understand each other, right? Like our working memory is a challenge. And so we can empathize with each other in a very deep way. Can I share an example of something I practiced? So my 11-year-old was sleeping in the basement bedroom. Okay. And I had woken her up once and I knew she had fallen back asleep. Well, we were kind of running late for school. Well, so my initial reaction was, okay, we gotta go. Like, get up, we gotta go, right? But on my way downstairs, I practiced a pause, right? And I said to myself, okay, she needs me regulated so that she can wake up regulated, and then she'll get ready faster so that we can get out of the door faster. So I was able to kind of process through that. And then I approached her a lot differently, right? So I laid down next to her, gave her some kisses, was like, good morning, my love. Let's get ready for school. I checked the lunch. This is what, so like I gradually helped her transition out of the sleep state and into her morning routine versus ripping her out of it because I'm overwhelmed. Right. So that's just an example. And that doesn't always go that way. But it was a beautiful transition and she did fantastic. She moved through her morning routine beautifully and we got out the door. Now it's gone different in the past. And so that's why I give that as an example, because in my state of overwhelm, I have been reactive. And I'm like, you got to get out of bed. Well, guess what? Her nervous system wakes up on high alert and then she's agitated and takes longer. Yeah. So I think reminding ourselves as parents that our regulated system actually saves us time in the future.
So much time. And that's what I tell people. If you stopped for 90 seconds on a pause and just collected yourself, reframed, went in there, regulated, you will save yourself a 20-minute meltdown. So you decide a minute and a half or 20. It's sort of like, it's a choice. Yep. It doesn't always work, right? You might do the pause and still have the 20-minute meltdown. That's a possibility, but not a probability, right? It does really shift when we're more regulated, when we engage. And, I think that's just hard to realize how important we are. Almost, right? We don't realize our importance, and parents are like everything, right? We're the center of the universe for these folks.
Yeah. I agree.
Let me ask you to say more about the rejection sensitivity and like, how can a parent approach their child who perceives a lot of things as rejection, just the normal nose of a day or the normal facial expressions, even just things that feel like slights to some children who have this, and that it's a real thing, and that they're not just being difficult, which is how we see all of these behaviors, like you're just being difficult, but that's not true, right? They can't help themselves. But you also can't help this particularly. But if you were trying to help your child, how would you go about doing that?
Well, first of all, just to make sure all the listeners know what it is, because I think, this is one thing that I present to a lot of parents, and they had no idea about it, right? And it's like this eye-opening, this epiphany. They're like, oh my gosh, it has a name. And honestly, as a personal experience, I experienced rejection sensitivity to a very deep level. And I was never able to name it growing up. And once I did have a name for it, it was life-changing. Right? Because I was able to then do something with it. Because before
Right.
it kind of owned me, now I'm able to own it. And so that's what we want to do, help our kids get to, right? Is get to the point where they're naming the experience. Because what rejection sensitive dysphoria is this, internal, external, or perceived feeling of rejection. And it's not just like a little feeling, like a little tingle. It's actually described as like piercing, right? So any sort of feeling of rejection. So one thing that I think is super important to know about rejection sensitive dysphoria is, it comes in all shapes and sizes for different people. But kids with ADHD, research shows that they hear 20,000, this is the most heartbreaking statistic, 20,000 more negative comments by the age of 10 than their neurotypical peers.
Wow.
20,000. It's just heart-wrenching when you think about it, right? And so they're already getting that negative feedback, right? And not only 20,000 from the outside in, but guess what else? They're their own biggest bully, right? Like they're also feeding themselves a script oftentimes that is feeding that narrative of rejection. And so I think it's just so important. Research is showing that actually rejection sensitive dysphoria is one of the driving forces to emotional dysregulation because it's such an internal experience that isn't externally seen as such, right? Like, especially because some of it's perceived, like you said, body language, facial expression, any sort of comment with a tone that's perceived as rejection is felt to the core. I loved this analogy. I can't remember who it is. I'll have to look up his name, but he gave this really good analogy with an orange. And he said, okay, this is an orange of a neurotypical person, right? And you have a peeler, right? And if somebody who's neurotypical they hear every once in a while, it's like criticism. It kind of cuts them, it kind of cuts them here and there. But when you squeeze the orange, it's still hard, right? Because they're still tough. They kind of have time to toughen up. But then there's same thing in orange peeler. You're not good enough. I'm stupid. Rejection on the playground. Rejection from a teacher with a facial expression. So like cut. And then you squeeze that orange, and what happens? It explodes, right? So I like that visual for the fact that, then kids, that's why they give us you might think, well, why is he having such a big reaction to that? Well, it's because it hurts that bad, right? It cuts that deep. And so I think I just wanted to paint that picture for parents because I think it's so important to know the depth of rejection sensitive dysphoria, that it's not just something that's like, oh, it's something that once in a while. It's statistically like 98% of kids with ADHD and adults have an experience with rejection sensitive dysphoria.
That's a big number. I really didn't know that big number like that. That's a lot. That means all the kids.
Pretty much all of us. Yeah. To some degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single child I work with has an experience with it to a degree.
It's not just hurt feelings, right? Because hurt feelings are things that just kind of go away. What happens when you feel pierced, to the core? Is it like a quick blast of cortisol and adrenaline to your prefrontal cortex, and so you're dysregulated, and then you have to come down from that
Right. So it brings all those emotions to that prefrontal cortex, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just it feels piercing. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like somebody has just punched you in the gut or you
Mm-hmm.
know, but what looks like to us like a facial expression, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
why? And a lot of times kids are seen as too sensitive
Mm-hmm.
or, like, oh, you're being over dramatic or you're too sensitive. But I think knowing that it's that much of an intense like physical experience can kind of help us as parents be more
Mm-hmm.
empathetic to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the other day I was in the car with my 8-year-old and he struggles with rejection sensitive dysphoria intensely. And I was actually very calm. I was very, but I was wanting to bring up a topic to him that was hard to talk about what we needed to talk about, right? It was something that he was having a hard time with. And so I started bringing it up and his whole body like tensed up and he started kind of kicking at the seat. And I paused and I said, "Oh, buddy," I said, "I can see your body is having a big reaction to what I'm saying. Are you feeling like mommy's rejecting you for what you did?" And he's like, "Yes." And they said, "Okay, that's that rejection." And so then I'll name it for him, right? Well, you're experiencing that rejection sensitive dysphoria and that it is painful. So let's pause and not talk about it right now. And when you're ready to talk about it, right? So like just help then I'm validating the fact that he is experiencing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's because I remember feeling crazy too when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Why am I so
Mm-hmm.
upset about this? You
Right.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's why, teaching our kids how to name it, claim it,
Mm-hmm.
tame it, and then reframe it is a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful way to, train them up to identify it so that it's not such a emotional trigger for them.
Right. A Dan Siegel approach.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that. Kind of coming around as neuroscience, basic neuroscience, right? You have to have language for it. You have to be able to find it in your body and name it. And
Mhm.
and until you do that, you can't actually really understand it at all. And it's
Correct.
just happening to you and you feel sometimes I tell parents, I think it's like they feel like they're about to die. That feeling. It feels like they're
Mhm.
about to die from whatever shame or whatever that feeling is, right?
Right. Shame,
The
embarrassment.
rejection. Yeah.
Yep.
But if you can talk about it, then you have a chance then to do some things like let's wait a second and we can come back and talk about this when you're ready, and that kind
Mhm.
of thing, right? Those are just really good approaches. And then when you do come back and talk about it, you can, talk about how it's okay. That isn't really the intention, but it was still the feeling, right? So to validate them.
Right. Well, and even like where you talk with them about it. Like it might be at home. All the kids have sensory swings in their room. You have neurodivergent children, but they all have sensory swings in their room. But so my son, if I want to have hard conversations with him, sometimes I'll go in his room when he's swinging. Right. Because he's releasing some of that energy. And sometimes that helps his mind stay calm so that he can have a cognitive conversation with me and his emotions aren't coming to the front so quickly, because he's, able to kind of regulate while we're communicating. So even that's something I'm not saying everybody should go out and get a sensory swing, but, you know, finding a time when, or even if you're playing a game with them, or if you're like, it's always helpful sometimes to have them keeping their hands busy so that they are listening
Mhm.
to what you're sharing with them.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a misnomer sometimes where a kid is fidgeting or throwing something in the air while they're like in therapy, for example, with me.
Mhm.
They're doing all this behavior, right? And the parents
Mhm.
like, okay, put that down. And I'm like, oh, can they? It's okay with me.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Keep it in their hands.
Yeah.
They are still listening, and but sometimes they actually aren't listening,
Right.
right? So sometimes the
Yeah.
fidgets do distract to the point where they're sort of moved away from whatever the conversation is. Do you find that to be true as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the child and it depends on the fidget. And maybe that's when you find a way to transition them to something else where it is helpful. And that's the thing is discovering which tools are helpful for listening, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it might not be one fidget, but it could be another one, like it could be a different one. It could be a swing. It could be, like I said, playing a game, like playing a
Mhm.
board game or so. I think it's figuring out the best way for your child to hear for their ears to be open.
Right, right. And they're not all cookie cutters, so you do have to see what
No.
their preference is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking to a mom yesterday or the day before, and we were having quite a discussion about the difference between neural pathways and habits. And she was making a point that she thought that her son's only hears the first few words and then doesn't hear the rest of the sentence. And that it's just a bad habit he has of not listening to the rest of the sentence, and that she could make him listen to the whole sentence somehow. And I was trying to help her see that these are neural pathways, whether they're called habits or neural pathways. I was trying to suggest that in that moment, he can't hear the rest of the sentence. I was suggesting, stopping, making sure that he was present, not like looking away or whatever, not like look at me, but just, making sure he was there, asking him to wait before he decides he's heard the whole sentence. And she was telling me that she didn't think those were good strategies. And I was wondering, ask an expert, what is a good strategy for a child who chronically does, hears the first few words and runs off to do it, but there's a whole nother half of the sentence that they aren't hearing. So they're not actually doing what is being asked of them.
Well, sometimes I teach just the strategy, the repeat strategy. Like, hey, what did you hear me say?
Yeah.
Just simply like and what's super interesting about what did you hear me say is you might get something back that was not your exact messaging, right? Like,
Right.
hey, and I apologize if this is going off of what you're like going in a different direction, but it just reminds me of, like I said to my daughter, hey, Lainey, can you make sure the bathroom's clean? Because she was using our shared bathroom. I said, make sure it's clean before you go to school. I will, Mom. I'll do it before. She got very reactive, and I was like, whoa. And I paused and I said, Lainey, what did you hear me say? And she was like, well, that I never do the bathroom right. And I said, interesting. And I was as calm as I was as cool as a cucumber the whole time. But it was just interesting. So her narrative was completely different than and I said, oh, love, that's not what I intended for you to hear. I was just wanting you to hear a reminder that it was an expectation that I have before you leave for school. That's all. I think I do trust that you'll do it. And I think you do a great job at it. So then it gave me an opportunity to speak to the narrative versus, you know what I mean? So I just love that. What did you hear me say? Because then it allows them to repeat your sentence to see, to see how much of it they heard. Or, like I said, sometimes you'll discover that they heard something totally different, and that's where that rejection sensitivity comes. Like, that's another piece of that puzzle, right? A lot of times kids will take a part of what you said and it twists in their minds, and all of a sudden it becomes a projected rejection. And you're like, whoa, I did not hear that at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's happened a few times. My husband actually said it to our other daughter because she was very reactive about something he asked of her. And he said, hey, what did you just, hey, Cal, what did you just hear me say? And she was like, that you expect me to be perfect. And I said, and he said, oh, that's interesting. And then he was able to speak to that,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's
so
great. That's a great
I hope that wasn't too far off from what you were asking me, but I just thought that could speak into, just because a lot of this with our kids with ADHD is the narrative going on inside their head.
Right.
So much of it. Right. And so much of it is distorted,
Well, if 98% of what is said to you is negative or is some kind of correction, how could your mind say almost anything else to you?
Right.
Right? Yeah. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. So if you had advice to give to parents who really struggle with the ADHD busyness, and it was beyond regulation, because of course regulation is going to be key there for all parents, not just parents of kids with ADHD. Are there some other key things that you think parents should learn about or know about that maybe, I'm not an ADHD coach, so it's not like I actually have all this in the palm of my hand. What other things might you say, yeah, it would be really good for parents to learn this or to understand this or to reframe this? Do you have some thoughts about that?
Well, I think because what I'm hearing you say is like after you are like you've worked on your regulation, but now they're still dysregulated. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
That one.
Yep. It's called
Um,
ADHD.
oh, ah, I know it's crazy. But I think just continuing to help your child raise self awareness around their own dysregulation, right,
Mhm,
and what works for them.
mhm,
So, for instance, my 8-year-old, and this is the thing, and this is a huge message. Nothing needs to be fixed. It needs to be figured out, right? Like I think it's so important as parents that we're in this constant on this constant journey. You're not alone, and you're in this constant journey of figuring out what works, figuring out how you can help, how you can get regulated, and then help them be self-aware of their mind and body and what works for them to help them regulate, right? So my 9-year-old, she has discovered, she's very, I mean, obviously I'm an ADHD coach because so I talk about it very openly at our
mhm.
house, but she's discovered, and it's not foolproof, right? We have moments of meltdown, we have periods of meltdown, but I think it's important to know that meltdowns are not a parenting failure, right?
Right,
I think that's
mhm.
so important to know. Meltdowns are a mind and body's way of saying, if this is too much, I'm having a hard time, I need help, right? So I think as parents, it's so important to separate that because it's so
Mhm.
easy to take it personally. Like, what am
Yeah.
I doing wrong? I mean, I even will have my own meltdown
Mhm,
about what am I doing, you know? So I think it's super important to know that
mhm.
and to discover the way that your child uniquely finds regulation, right? Like and recognize when there's a need for being kind of ahead of the game, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So for instance, I know that when my kids come home, they have just used all of their fuel. Like their cognitive fuel tank is completely on empty. So we've discovered that we need a few things. We need movement after school. We need protein. Protein's so good for the brain, right? So we need to make sure we have protein snacks ready. And then we need to make sure we have a routine or a plan in place to know, what's next.
Mhm,
Because when we didn't have that, it was literally full on meltdown, right? Like
mhm,
sometimes WWF between my kids. So, just discovering what routines and systems work best for them. The kids crave that. They crave routines. They crave systems in place so that they feel more in control of their mind and
mhm,
body, and then putting things into place for them to help them discover what regulates them.
mhm,
Even making sure their sleep is on track,
mhm,
making sure their nutrients is there. So just being mindful of all those
mhm,
different parts while also helping your child raise awareness
mhm.
in all the different areas that come into play when it comes to, calming our minds down and,
Yeah.
regulating our day through routine.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when you have ADHD, you always have it. It's not like it's going away. So you can't have a good week because you structured or you predicted all of what you just talked about, right? That they
Right.
have to be fed, they have to have movement, they have to have an understanding and insight and all of that in a structure. So you said all of that, and the week went great, but then the following week is sort of like, okay, now we've got this. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, not really. No, you're going to have to do
No.
that next week too, right?
Right.
So is it sort of wrong minded in a way to think that if you were able to do this for, let's say, 6 months, you did this, what you're talking about, would it transfer into habits? Yeah.
It will, and I know that the reason I shake my head with certainty is because as a coach, I coach for 6 months and I see it happen, right? Like
Right.
I have kids come to me who are a hot mess with dysregulation and, having meltdowns and having a hard time in different areas. Every child's different. But then
Mhm.
after 6 months of and a lot it's heavy on the parent side, right? I
Yeah.
coach parents first, and especially for younger kids. And so as the parents understand their child's brain better, right? Then they start responding better. The
Mhm.
child feels seen, the child feels understood, the child starts being more self-aware. And
Mhm.
then you put the routines in place, put the systems in place. Mom and dad are trying to regulate before communicating. So all these things are being put into place.
Mhm.
And so yes, it's not nothing's ever foolproof. It's a lifelong learning journey. But I can tell you through testimonials that transformational change can happen when these things are put into place, right? And you're going to have your bad days. We all do. I mean, It would be weird if you didn't. Like even neurotypical kids have have hard days.
Yeah.
So, but yes, there are definitely ways to create habits that will help you and your child thrive day to day.
Okay. Well, that's good news, I think, for a lot of listeners right now. So, Katelyn, we're out of time, but I want you to have a chance to talk about what you do and share with my listeners how they can use you as a coach if they want to, if they can. And I know all of your information, of course, will be in the show notes.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So I am an ADHD life coach. I'm based out of Wisconsin, but I do all virtual, which people always say to me, how do you do virtual with kids? Because I let them fidget. And so I've kind of become a master in the virtual world of, coaching kiddos with ADHD. So yes, that is my profession and that is what I do. And I would love, I can share my consultation link with you. If you ever want to just check it out we could have a free consultation where you just check it out, learn about my 6-month package, what it all entails. I can send you testimonials and we can go from there. But a free resource I also have is my own podcast called Journey with Me Through ADHD. And it's a podcast for kids. My episodes, I actually am up to almost 240 episodes.
Awesome.
And so you can kind of pick from them, which is kind of nice. I have guests on there. I have kids who share on there, which kids love to hear from other kids. I have my own kids. I have kids that have volunteered. And some episodes are just me solo. But I try to keep them short and sweet. So it's a really good communication starter for parents and their kiddos on different topics that are sometimes tough to talk about. And then I have a book called Hi, It's Me, I Have ADHD. It's right here. So here's my book. That's on my website. So yeah. Thanks.
Well, that's all so great. I love that you have a kid podcast. I love that as a resource so much.
Thank you.
And also that people can work with you wherever they are, because my listeners are across lots of places in the United States, but also Canada and Iceland, other places, right? So I love that they could have access to you, because it is one of the harder things for parents who are neurotypical to understand about their kids who are neurodivergent. So Katelyn, thank you so much for giving me your beautiful wisdom for today and for sharing it with my peeps.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you all for being here today, listening to Unmuted Love. I'm C. Eshelman, and I will see you next week, where nothing is off limits to talk about related to children from difficult beginnings. Remember, your love matters when more than love is required.